The Labor Day weekend sale is on at Tanger Outlets. Score up to 70% off at top brands like Nike Factory Store, Crocs, J. Crew Factory, Gap Outlet, and so many more. Refresh your wardrobe with the latest arrivals for less from all your favorite brands this Labor Day weekend. Tanger Outlets, always on trend, always on sale. Plan your trip at Tanger.com.
We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 123. I'm your host, Chris Webster, with my co-host, Paul Zimmerman. Today, we discuss all things ground-penetrating radar with Dr. Dan Bigman. Let's get to it. All right, everybody, welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast. Paul, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How you doing today, Chris?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Busy as usual. Man, I've had like 6 hours straight of client meetings today without like a room to breathe. Yeah. And now we're doing a podcast. So it's been great. All right. So we are bringing on what I want to say. I didn't actually do the research on this, but I think it's a two-time guest, Dr. Dan Bigman. And I met him first when we were at the University of Georgia. Actually, I didn't have a lot of interaction with Dan at the University of Georgia. I think my class went out and see one of the sites you were working on or something. You were in the ends of your PhD program and we kind of met then, but then we sort of stayed in touch over the years. So, and I interviewed you a few years ago, at least on the Archaeotech Podcast, but we're bringing you back on because you're on to bigger and better things and you're just continuing to do stuff. So Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Why don't we start by just talking about what your company is and what your company does, just your elevator pitch for that.
So my company is called Bigman Geophysical. I started it 5 years ago after working in academia for a few years. I've taught at Georgia State University. And the company basically provides training, equipment, software, and project and technical support for folks using geophysics. And obviously my background is in archaeology. And so a lot of the folks that we work with are also in the CRM world. And so I think it's, nice and helpful to be on this podcast for sure, because we're constantly on sites with equipment. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but that's what we do. So we basically provide training, equipment, software, and field support for projects that are utilizing geophysics or other methods of non-destructive testing.
All right. And so for somebody that doesn't know anything about GPR or other geophysical methods, they can come to you guys to not only get some of the equipment, but also learn how to use that equipment, take a class from you guys. Are these on-site like instructional classes? Do you go to them? Do they come to you? Do you do these in other places? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do both. We probably train more people on ground penetrating radar than anyone else in North America.
Nice.
We are accredited with NOLCA, and we're actually in the process right now of being able to provide engineers, for example, with continuing education credits. And so we'll hold public courses, usually about once a month. We hold them all over the country. A lot of them are in Atlanta because I'm in Atlanta, but we have them in Cincinnati, Texas, Los Angeles, New York, Baltimore, Toronto, we've held them in. And then we've held them all over the world. I've held courses in the UK and Australia for the Australia listeners. I just came back from a 9-day trip to Australia. It was my third or fourth trip over there. And so we hold them all over the place. And so we'll do these public ones, but then we'll also have private group trainings where we'll come out, not only train you on the theory and the concepts and do classroom-based training, but we are the only training company that will go on site to your project, collect the data hand in hand with you as you're training. And so for us, we're from the field, right? Like you said in the beginning of the thing, you came to the site that I was working on. Dude, the amount of hairs I pulled out while I was on that site trying to use geophysics is ridiculous. And so we have kind of been through the hardest stuff, and I've probably made more mistakes than anybody, but luckily I'm willing to share those mistakes and help people avoid them. And so we will come on to site with you, archaeological project, cemetery project, which is pretty popular, obviously in CRM or anything else, and literally train you on your equipment, on your site. There's no other better way to get exposure. Unfortunately, there are some companies that will have a pre-manufactured location, and it's like the perfect soils for geophysics and the perfect contrast with the targets. and it's just not real. And so when people show up at our course, they say, look, we got training and we then came back home and nothing looked like it did when we were training. And so that's why we say, we'll train you and we'll totally train you in the soils that you're going to be working on with the system that you work on. And we don't care what system it is, right? We're totally agnostic to system. So the companies we represent as far as equipment, we represent 4 different manufacturers and actually rent out equipment from 6 different manufacturers, because we're big believers in that the technician, the archaeologist, is far more important than the label slapped on the side of the box that you're pushing around. So we'll train on anything. It doesn't matter if it's a sensors and software, or GSSI, or MALA, or IDS, or whatever. So yeah, so that's it. It's a long-winded answer, but that's, the reason that it's long-winded is I'm passionate about education, and I think it's really important. And I was lucky enough to find a way, although I left academia, to stay in education, which is through technical training and continuing education for professionals.
Great. Now, are your clients, are they mostly archaeologists, or do you have other clients beyond just archaeologists?
We have other clients beyond archaeologists. Archaeologists probably make up, for training wise, probably 10% of our clients.
Oh, really?
The other customers are like students, are engineers and folks in the construction space. So we all kind of use the same equipment, and we're big believers. If you understand how the physics work and you understand the material science behind it, then you can utilize the systems, whether you're in engineering or you're in construction or you're in archaeology or you're in environmental consulting. We train people on things like how to find groundwater and how to map, contaminated soils and find the plume for a leak, things like that. But then we'll also train on how do you find graves, how do you map an archaeological site? Because it's different to map an archaeological site and go find utilities. Those are different processes. There's things you have to do in one case that you don't have to do in another case. And so we go over all of that. So it's a wide variety, but archaeologists certainly make up, at least a small portion of who we train.
It's awesome that you've decided to take this and turn it into an educational resource and train people how to do these things, because archaeologists, we always think we get into this field and it's like, oh, I'm just going to be out walking in the desert or digging shovel tests or doing these things. But there's a lot of technical aspects to what we do. And a lot of people just simply don't get that training in either their undergrad or their graduate course. I was fortunate. I was telling Paul this before the recording, that I took the shallow geophysics course at UGA when I was getting my master's there. And that was fantastic. Gave me a real primer on a lot of the shallow geophysical methods that you're talking about, that you guys do. So I want to talk about some of the stuff that you guys do and then some of the more CRM specific things, or at least, archaeology project specific things.
Sure.
But first, what got you into the training? I'm really curious about that, because as somebody who's trying to sell, digital recording methods to archaeologists for the last 10 years and really hitting a wall in a lot of cases because they're resistant to technology for whatever reason. Maybe it's budget, maybe it's technical competency, who knows? But
it's like some archaeologists want to use tools developed 10,000 years ago to do the
right.
Excavating with a fulsome point, it's not easy to do that. So the way that we got into training was when I started the company, it was an archaeological physics contractual type of training. And I just went knocking on doors, and some people, needed it, but there was quite a few folks out there who had actually owned equipment already. And they said, the one guy or one gal who knew how to use it has gone to another firm. And we folded it up, we put it in a closet, and it's been sitting there ever since. So rather than hire you to do the projects for us, can you train us and do the projects with us? And, it didn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
Business, I take anything I get, right? And so that's kind of how it re-evolved back into education. Was people were basically saying that they needed it. So as I did some more digging, we found that there's so few options for training in geophysics, whether you're an archaeologist, engineer, environmental professional. There's so few options beyond the university that if you weren't lucky like Chris, right, and you didn't have a program that, like Chris and I, right, that you didn't have a program that offered it, then there was almost no options for you. And the options were kind of limited to manufacturer specific. And so we came in and I said, I don't care what it is. I said, if we've never used your system before, I said, bring it in. We will figure out your system while you're on site doing the training. And so, that's kind of how it got started. We found that was just a typical situation everywhere. because people move around. Folks invest sometimes in technology, not always certainly, but sometimes they do. And when they do, they want to, they want to spend $25,000 on a piece of equipment and spend $0 on training. And it sort of doesn't work like that, right? It's a useless piece of machinery if nobody knows how to use it. And the folks who were putting it in the closet and folding it up really were what was going on. But at least they kind of opened their eyes and said, well, all right, here's someone who could potentially come in and get this thing back up and running, because these technologies are a moneymaker. And when you think about it, like, for example, the digital recording that you offer, Chris, if it's an investment, but you're saving time and you're able to produce, a big thing for us is workflow. Okay. We always get asked this question. I actually recently did a video about this on YouTube, by the way. So I have a YouTube channel called youtube.com/learn GPR. Free, 90 plus videos on there. But I had a question like asked 6 times in a row to me. And so I did a video on it. It was like, what's the best GPR that's available? And I kind of started going into it and saying they want the magic bullet, but the magic bullet really isn't there, right? In reality, it's the technology that, because people want to say, what's the best antenna? But the antenna isn't the only thing that's out there, right? The other big pieces that some software packages have that others don't are efficiency of workflow. And so being very practical and kind of rolling into the next part of the podcast, right, about in CRM is time from field to deliverable is such an important variable to control that it is the moneymaker. And so going to digital recording and being able to save, even if it costs you a little bit, but you could save, 2/3 of your time from going from data collection to actual high quality. It's not just deliverable, but it's high quality deliverable in 1/3 of the time is a huge benefit. And folks don't unfortunately understand it until they actually go through it, right? So when you've done something the same way over and over, it's hard sometimes to recognize the benefits that are right in front of you. And so, so for us, that was the point, was that it was something that can save people time, save people money, and more importantly, when we're working with folks in the utility space and engineering, it's like if you can increase site safety by utilizing all the tools available to you, so you have less of a chance of striking a gas line or electrical line or something like that, it's really your fault if you don't get trained, right? You bought the equipment and you're unwilling to spend, another $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 so everybody knows how to use it well, then it's really on you. The liability lies with you. And so it's an important piece. And so folks who kind of are, to speak to your point, Chris, hesitant to grab onto new technology, we see this all the time where they say, look, I only get 3 calls a year for GPR or for geophysics, whatever. And so they struggle to justify purchasing a system. And we say to them that you only get 3 calls a year, but if you had a system on your truck and you offered every project geophysics or non-destructive testing or some level of it, so you probably wouldn't do 3, you'd do 30 projects in your first year, because you don't understand the impact of a tool until you actually have it available every day. And the same thing with the digital recording, right? It's like it's hard to justify if you don't recognize, if you don't actually have one in hand sometimes to recognize, oh wow, we just did the project that used to take us 3 weeks to do in 1 week. And so it's such a benefit because it's true, right? I mean, you're laughing because it's true, but it's such a benefit to utilize these technologies that that it's just it's sort of silly not to not to get the training on this stuff and not to open yourself up to new technologies that may not be a revenue generator, but could certainly be kind of a revenue recovery system because you're buying your time back.
Yeah, and the nice thing about those systems is, while the GPR in particular might be, when you look at the price tag on one of those things, it's probably expensive and you tack on the training, but you make your money back really quickly, like you're saying, in time and in effort, because if it reduces the amount of holes you got to dig because you did some ground truthing first and you said, listen, let's figure out what's here, then you're making your money back, like you said. Along those lines, that is the number one way I try to sell digital archaeology through like WildNote, as I try to say, hey, listen, don't look at the cost, look at the savings, look at the time savings, and look at the, because time is money, not to use the cliche, but it really is. And the time savings are what gives you it. So all these pieces of technology, are designed to save you time. And that's what I always tell people, that relation to any technology related to archaeology in particular, whether you're talking about digital recording on mobile devices, shallow geophysics, or drones, if it's not saving you time and increasing the value of your data set to your clients or to the site, then don't do it. I mean, that's a simple fact, but chances are all these things will do that. You just need the training for it. So along those lines, in the last few minutes of this first segment, you're now distributor for some of this gear. Do you require training for certain things when you sell it to people, or do you just heavily advise it?
So we only do, we look at ourselves much more like as an advisor. Most of the people that we've sold anything to, that's hardware based, are people who've taken trainings anyway. Because when somebody comes to our training, they're going to have at least 3 or 4 different systems to get their hands on, and so I don't have to push anybody, to do anything. It's just, here's the different systems. Here's the stuff we like. Obviously, there's a variety of them that are better or worse at different things. Some have more features for filtering data in the field. Some have better features for back workflow and speed to deliverable. Some have a single antenna that you can swap in and out, and some have 2 antenna right in the same box. So to us, it almost doesn't matter. We've had decided that here's kind of the set of systems that we only represent, by the way, things that we use in the field. And so we literally use equipment from 4 different GPR manufacturers in the field because we feel strongly about all of them. And so, so we offer quite a number of options. But from a sense of we're not out there, pushing and selling. We really are a training company first, which is also very different than most other equipment resellers, because the equipment resellers first. And for us, we actually have told people, look, don't buy it from us yet. Come to the training, because you'll make your decision after you've gone through the motions on 3 different pieces of equipment, and so
right.
So that's it. I mean, we really look at ourselves as a training first. The reason that we even started to distribute equipment, by the way, was because we felt like we were doing the job of the resellers, because we'd have people who came in and we'd show them how to use their equipment, and they said, I don't know why. We've been using the system for 2 years, and the guy who sold it to us never knew that this function, never told us about this function. And it was like a critical function to doing things right. It's like, how deep is the object, right? Like, that's pretty critical when you're using GPR. And they were like, the guy who sold it to me just never. And so I said, I'm sick and tired of realigning, the customers of other people. So we might as well, step in and offer them stuff that we've personally tested in the field. And so we do a lot of rentals, actually. We do a lot of rentals, a lot of used equipment sales. And so, offer them stuff that we've literally used in the field, and then back it up with training and support. And so I just got tired of literally doing the job of the reseller from another company who spent, 45 minutes with a customer and did something. They only had 1 unit. They didn't even know how it worked. And, and they really needed a training, to be honest. And so that's how we got into it in the first place. We just felt like we were doing the jobs of other people. So we said, if we're doing the jobs, we might as well actually do it, and make it part of the business. And then the other thing was, we started to actually distribute, before we even were distributing radar or any other systems, distributing accessories that people weren't getting. Archaeologists like us, we were always looking for high quality GPS units that were affordable. I used to be a land surveyor. I wasn't interested in firing up a boundary, for a dispute or something like that. I just wanted like a RTK level GPS that was totally affordable by somebody doing archaeology. And so we started to use systems from a company called MLID, which are available now in North America, and we're a distributor. And so we started using them for our own personal use. We rented one out to a student of ours, right, who had purchased a GPR, didn't have a GPS unit, got a project finding sinkholes. And he said, I need a GPS. I said, great, we'll rent you our GPS. We sent him the GPS. He did the project, sent us an email saying, invoice me for the GPS and just go buy another one yourself, because he didn't want to give the GPS. And so after we did, that happened, went to MLID and said, look, we have a lot of customers just like this guy. Can we just distribute our stuff here? Because there aren't a lot of availability, of it. And they said, yes. So now we distribute 2 systems that integrate with any GPR. And we've integrated them with the magnetometer. We've integrated them with conductivity meters and other tools that are used in archaeological geophysics.
Nice.
So, we kind of have a different stuff. And if somebody goes to the website, bigmangeo.com, they'll see the brands that we work with. They're all high quality brands. Like I said, we've been offered deals from other folks that we've turned down, even though they were quote unquote lucrative, just because we didn't like their system. Like we've tried their systems and we decided not to use it in the field. And so I don't care how much you offer me, we're not going to represent you if we don't think it's kind of up to par.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to take it to break. And when we come back on the other side, we're going to talk about some of the specific applications to CRM and what kind of things you can look for to determine whether or not you need one of these methods. And we'll try to nail that down and solve all the world's problems on the other side of the break. Back in a second. Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code Archaeotech. That's ARCHAEOTECH. Looking to expand your knowledge of X-rays and imaging in the archaeology field? Then check out An Introduction to Paleoradiography, a short online course offering professional training for archaeologists and affiliated disciplines. Created by archaeologist, radiographer, and lecturer James Elliott, the content of this course is based upon his research and teaching experience in higher education. It is approved by the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists as 4 hours of training. That's in the UK, for those of you that don't know. So don't miss out on this exciting opportunity for professional and personal development. For more information on pricing and course structure, visit paleoimaging.com. That's PALEO imaging.com, and look for the link in the show notes to this episode.
Ready to level up your career? Text DISH to 44043 now to dive into a world of exciting technician opportunities at DISH. From cutting-edge technology to a supportive work environment, DISH offers the perfect platform for your success. Connect with us today to discover how you can be part of a dynamic team driving innovation. Connect today and join the DISH family, where innovation meets opportunity. Text DISH to 44043 to kickstart your journey towards a rewarding career.
Welcome back to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 123. And we are talking to Dr. Dan Bigman of Bigman Geophysical. And, in the first segment, Dan, we talked about what you guys offer and the different types of training and some GPRs and things like that. But now I want to focus on CRM, and we can really make this a general archaeological discussion because it's not just CRM that can use these things. Obviously, anybody working on any project. What are some of the circumstances or scenarios, and I know this is really hard to determine, but what are some of the things you can think of where somebody should be saying, hey, I should be really thinking about shallow geophysics on this project, something like that. I'm thinking of my own self. I've got a project to do out in the Eastern Mojave Desert, and it's all pedestrian survey. It's a 1,200-acre pedestrian survey in the desert, and I'm trying to think in what circumstances we'd have to find some sites and then do it locally on those sites, to try to see what's subsurface if we got that far. The Navy's probably just going to blow it up. But either way, we'd have to do something like that. But what are some circumstances you can think of where, say, a CRM firm should be thinking to themselves, hey, I should contact Bigman Geo and figure out how to get this GPR out here or some other method? What are some things people should be thinking about before they make that call?
Sure. And it doesn't have to be us. I mean, just contact any firm, maybe a local firm. There's a lot of good archaeological physics firms out there. And folks, should
we want them to call you.
Yeah, I know. But folks should be at figuring out good people to bring on site more often than not, because geophysics in general offers a number of advantages to almost all archaeological projects. There's very few that it offers, no advantages to. The first one is, like you suggested, even in the first segment, is if you could potentially reduce the number of holes. It's all destructive, right? Mm-hmm. Anything is destructive. And so any way we can reduce the number of holes, and by the way, all digging, including shovel tests, actually reduces site safety. So any way that we could, you can't get rid of digging, right? You still have to have verification. So geophysics is never going to be synonymous with verification. But if you can reduce the number of holes on any site, regardless, or size of excavation, then the project is going to benefit. So that's number one. Number two is some people don't realize how far geophysics has come as far as the deployment of technology. So GPR, for example, now has very affordable multi-channel systems. And so, we use one from time to time it's got 32 antennae in one box. And so the box is like an entire meter long. And so you can basically cover a site in a fraction of the time that you used to be able to cover it in, except you do it with higher resolution density, higher density, high resolution data, and a much faster back end to like processed information and interpretations than used to be done before. Folks, unfortunately, if they haven't used it all that often, or you use a channel system, a lot of time, which are still relevant and important, and we use them all the time. But there are quite a number of projects that can benefit from a multi-channel system because the pricing has gone way down to use this stuff on site because the data acquisition times have become much faster. So, the benefits are like increasing site safety, reducing destruction, and really you can get more information for less money in a less amount of time than you used to be able to do. And so most projects, should consider it. I mean, I'll give you a couple, examples. So like your project example, right? You do a large scale survey and you find sites, you could run over pretty small sites in a pretty rapid amount of time, and collect information and see, well, where are the exact high amplitude magnetic anomalies that we can test as opposed to just shovel testing, right? And you can literally pick and choose a couple of things to really target to see what's going on. Even with magnetometer, I mean, there are systems now, there are cart pulled systems with GPS, RTK GPS integrated with 8 sensors on it that you can, have a 2 or 3 meter swath of and just cover lots of space in a really short time and just pinpoint the targets of interest, so that'd be like in your case. I'll give you some examples of that we've done, over time. We did one project in California, for example, where it was a California transportation-based project, and basically the project was going to disturb an archaeological site that was known and had excavation done on it in the past. But the amount of time that the archaeologist, the CRM firm, was given in order to conduct their, 10 test pits, which is what their kind of contract was for, they had a really condensed amount of time. And they knew that the 10 test pits were it, because the site's getting destroyed after that. So, they really had to be specific with the test, and they needed to, condense how long they from start to finish. And so what we did was basically in 2 days, we ran over 2 acres with GPR and a magnetometer, and we pinpointed, we ranked basically anomalies and said these few had both a GPR response and a magnetic response. And, these would be the ones we hit first. This one had only magnetic, and so one we hit second, and these were only GPR responses, and we hit those, third, because it was kind of a rocky landscape, and there was, kind of a things it was inconsistent soil, so we were getting reflections off of things that probably were not GPR. I'm sorry, that were not archaeological, but that's one example, right, where the CRM firm itself had a very condensed time, but we covered 2 acres with 2 systems in 2 days. And the best part about this, I get on the plane, I fly back to Atlanta. When I land, I have a picture waiting in my email of a rock-lined burn pit that was uncovered, that they did in the 3 hours or 4 hours that it took me to go from California to, back home. So, that was a win.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
But that's a example, right? Where you just don't have a lot of time and you have a lot of space. It's not like the site was a small site. It was 20 by 20. The scatter of stuff out there was across 2 acres. And so where do you put your 10 test pits? You could miss everything you want to hit, right? So that was one example. Recently, we did another project in New York. It was a historic site. It was National Park, historic monument. They had some things to do regarding like infrastructure. So they're going to put like some new utilities and pipes and things like that in there. But what we were able to do was cover about, 1 or 2 acres of space in high density and basically map responses that were indicative of historic buildings, which is what, the archival research said. And so they were able to then in the phase kind of 2 is just test those buildings. Another benefit, by the way, of geophysics is not only did we map the archaeological or potentially archaeological and historic material, we mapped the pipes and the utilities. And so we were able to say, do a test pit here on this, potential historic building, but don't do it here because although it's a probable archaeological, historic remains, it does have a utility going right through it. And so we're able to use it as kind of cable avoidance and excavation guidance, and so it was another great example. And then we just actually got back from a site. One of my employees went up there. He went to Maryland, and basically it was just a historic cemetery, or suggested historic cemetery, and there were no graves. Archival research suggested it was there. We were just processing the data before we jumped onto this podcast. Before I jumped onto the podcast, and that's kind of a typical thing, right? It's total unknowns. So the way you used to do it was you'd probe over and over and over across an acre. Our guy finished it in 3/4 of a day because he had a GPS integrated GPR system, got 1.5 foot spacing, or half a meter spacing, just good high density, fast data recovery, and we already have images to send to them, and he got back the other day. So that kind of stuff is very helpful, because we can then try to go in and pinpoint what's going on, as opposed to, I will not take a push probe across an acre. So some people don't want it any other way, but when you have the tools. Now here's the issue: in the day, it took 3-4 days to do GPR work across a site that size. Now it takes us 6 hours to do it across that site with higher density and almost through to data processing, interpretations, and deliverables within days. It's no longer, when I set up the company even 5 years ago, it was 4 to 6. We used to say 4 to 8 weeks for report delivery. If people want it faster, a lot of times we can turn it around in 3 or 4 days, just because there's so much going on.
Yeah, Dan, those are great examples. I want to actually roll back just a little bit to something you said about using both GPR and magnetometry at the same time. Anytime I hear about one or the other, I think back to the late 90s. My advisor he was working at a tel site in Syria. They used GPR and they got absolutely no results. So they were calling it ground non-penetrating radar. And then shortly afterwards, they went through with magnetometry and they found great results. The following year, I was in a different tel site in Turkey, and they had the exact opposite. They got nothing from magnetometry, but they got great results from the GPR. So I was wondering, do you know a priori, do you have a sense of what might, using these two different methods, what might be the better tool for the job?
It's going to depend, right? So all geophysics works on is contrast in the geological materials, and obviously if archaeological materials will contrast with the geology or geomorphology. And so sometimes you can kind of have a sense, especially with GPR, what's going to be an easy day in the field, with nice results and a party afterwards, or everybody disgruntled and ticked off that they chose this profession. And so it happens, and a lot of that is driven by, for GPR at least, a couple of things is soil quality. Soil quality, we're talking about conductivity and mineralogy. And so certain minerals and highly conductive soils will deplete the GPR signal's energy very fast and make it tough to see anything, at any great depth. The other struggle with GPR, especially in archaeology, and we use this example in the training programs, is you need contrast between the archaeological materials and the host materials that they're embedded in. And so if there's no contrast, even though it's a different material, it's architecture, whatever, if you have a limestone cut block and it's embedded in dense limestone soils, base soils, and it's all dry, it's going to be tough to identify. Even if your signal holds up, it's going to be tough to identify that boundary, right, between the soils and the architecture, because all kind of the base material is the same. So that's a struggle, right? Where you might not be able to see much because you just have a similar physical properties of the archaeological materials themselves and the material that it's embedded in. So the other side is if you have great contrast, or you have signal that'll hold up really well, then it could be a really great data set that can help. And it's also assuming that you have a good enough kind of frequency of your GPR system to identify the targets that you're looking for. And so from the magnetometer side it's looking for, in a sense, it's not contrast, it doesn't work exactly the same, but that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for contrast in the intensity of the Earth's magnetic field. And so the Earth has this field, at varying intensities across the surface. And so what we're looking for is deviations from the Earth's field. And so what happens is when you have archaeological materials, sometimes, especially metal, which is cake, but you might have hearths, or things like that, where you have a local field, and that local field will sometimes, both enhance the Earth's field and it'll detract from it. And so those create what we call anomalies to the Earth's magnetic field, and may be indicative of archaeological remains. The problem is, if none of the materials have a magnetic signature themselves, then it could be tough to use a magnetometer to find any archaeological remains on any given site. And so using multi-sensory approaches, like using GPR and magnetics and conductivity, and whatever, is always going to bring better results in the end. And by better, I mean, more information to the archaeologists in order to either guide excavations or, make even anthropological kind of assessments about, community structure or whatever it is the more systems you use and the larger the perspective is, the larger space that you cover, the more that the community benefits from it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Unfortunately, customers aren't willing to pay all the time for sensors, right? They just want to pay for one, and that does happen. And we always say, look, we recommend multiple, but one sensor is better than zero sensors.
Something I want to mention here, based on what you said earlier, you're a guy that went up to Maryland and was able to do that project with a GPS, basically a GPS linked GPR, and really get this thing done accurately. The antennas for these ground penetrating radars look a lot like Roombas, which make me think, is there a reason this can't be like a combination of something like a Roomba and automated farm equipment? I mean, they have combines out there running with no people in them, just going back and forth, doing these things based on GPS tracks. Is there anything like that even available on the high end, or do you think that's something coming along soon? I mean, with object avoidance and things like that, and just have a technician out there to kind of monitor it and make sure it doesn't, run into traffic.
Yeah, I think that it's on its way. There's nothing out there right now that's like, an autonomous vehicle crawler-based type of system. There's been a lot of like chatter and excitement about throwing GPR onto drones, which we've worked on projects like that where, it's the application is going to drive it, right? And so the ones that we worked with drones were bathymetric surveys. So basically working with customers who are engineering firms, and they're trying to find the bottom of a freshwater lake or a freshwater river, and basically map the topography of the bottom of the lake bed. And so you used to have to do it by putting it in a raft and then drag the raft across. And generally in the US, you still have to do it that way because there are FCC limitations on how high you can go with a GPR attached to a drone. And so that hasn't picked up here yet, but we've done them in other parts of the world. But everyone's, all excited, about GPR and drones, and I am too. But really, size of the targets and application are going to drive what the best thing is. And I said, for archaeology, I just don't think the drone's going to be the best vehicle for it. I really believe that, and I could be wrong. I mean, this remains to be seen, but I believe that just because drones are very exciting right now, I think you get better information from a crawler-based unmanned vehicle than you would with a drone. And so my point is, I think it is coming, down the line. You do have to engineer it in a way that minimizes how much noise ends up in the data.
Sure.
And so as long as they kind of overcome that stuff, my assumption is that it won't be too far away from us, to do that. Okay. Or you attach it to something that's just, like a crawler or a vehicle, an autonomous vehicle that's far enough away, and it's just dragging it, but it happens to be dragging it, 3 meters behind. And so it won't impact too bad. But it's a great question.
Okay.
Still got to send the guy up there to push it.
We only have a few minutes left here.
Thanks, Dominic.
We only have a few minutes here. And the last thing that I wrote down, because I'm curious about this, you mentioned being able to find things like, and almost as a happenstance of just doing the project, but then for other clients specifically finding things like buried pipes and cables and stuff like that. Is there any concern around the energy generated by the GPR and certain things you could find? I'm thinking like natural gas lines, stuff like that. I'm specifically thinking of like unexploded ordnance, which is a possibility on the project I'm going to be on. Is there any possibility of the energy provided by this thing or output by this thing exciting the thing that you're detecting and possibly causing an issue, like an explosion?
Yeah. So number one, just for total transparency, right? I am not an electrical engineer. Okay. So I just want to be really clear. I say this all the time.
Sure.
I'm an archaeologist. They'll actually ask me, they're like, I'm thinking about building a radar. Will you help me? And I'm like, I'm not the right guy. I'll use the radar after you make it. But, I'm a field guy with an archaeology background. So just take what I say with a grain of salt when it comes to this kind of stuff. Now, I can only tell you what other people, have said to me. And so number one, no, of course, GPR is used all the time for doing unexploded ordnance surveys.
Okay.
Used all the time for doing natural gas surveys. Actually, it's a critical technology for doing natural gas pipeline surveys because traditional methods aren't always able to find them. Basically, if you have a natural gas line that's PVC or fiberglass or something like that, that's not conductive. If that pipe was not buried with a tracer wire, you can't use an EM locator, which are like what the guys use on the side of the roads that you're looking at who are, spray painting everywhere. And so those are great tools. But if your pipeline is not conductive and it doesn't have a wire that's buried with the pipeline to push a frequency through, GPR might be the only way to identify it. So it's often used for natural gas pipelines and things like that. For UXO, it's also used. And so, no, it shouldn't excite it. But so here's the kind of the electrical engineering piece, that I'll say is when I did a training, and so we still get trained, by the way, we are definitely not the people who say, no, we know enough and we never have to learn again. And I'm smiling while I'm saying this on the other side of this computer, because we do get people like that. They call us up and ask us for a question. We're like, we do cover this in a training. You might want to sit in and kind of get, and they're like, I could teach your class. I said, well, maybe you can, but you never, with the second you think you don't need to learn, is you start dying. And so we still get trained. And I look for training all the time. And there are lots of great, information out there and lots of other great knowledgeable people to talk to. So Greg Johnson, basically from Sensors and Software, laid it out for me in this way. And he said basically that your cell phone is 1,000 times, and I hope I'm not misquoting the number. Sorry, Greg. But your cell phone is more powerful than the radar. So his kind of point was that the energy produced from the radar really is not all that dramatic, and it shouldn't excite unexploded ordnance, or anything else for that matter, because it is a pretty low amount of energy. And part of that too is the FCC has pretty strict restrictions on how much output the radar can use. Okay. So don't worry, but maybe you don't push it around. Maybe that when you do a drone that flies a half a meter above the ground surface, or use an unmanned crawler. But yeah, they're used in UXO all the time.
That's right. Okay. All right, Paul, do you have anything else for Dan?
I want a fourth go around. at the Archaeo Tech podcast in another year or two from now, and I'm not going to be happy, Chris, if you're not the producer on it, and if you're not the interviewer because of this UXO project.
That's right.
Yeah, don't lose any limbs over this.
No, definitely not. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have with Dan today. Paul and I are going to come back for the App of the Day segment. But Dan, before we go, I have links to some of the things you've mentioned, like your website and YouTube here. But let's just remind everybody one more time how they can get a hold of you and your company and where they can find your stuff online.
Yeah. So you can go to either bigmangeo.com or you can go to learngpr.com. And we have lots of free training, online trainings over there, some introductory webinars and things like that about GPR. You can find us on any platform at whatever the platform is, /learngpr. I've got a big following on Facebook. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Definitely go to the YouTube channel and subscribe. Again, we have over 90 videos up there.
Cool.
Sometimes it's me in front of a whiteboard. Sometimes it's me ranting while I'm waiting for a plane, to go somewhere. But you feel free to make fun of me in the comments. So yeah, anywhere, but YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram /learngpr, and you'll find us.
Great. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Dan. And we'll definitely have you on again, assuming I don't explode in the next 2 weeks.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
America. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. At Grand Canyon University, we believe in equal opportunity, and the American dream starts with purpose. By honoring your career calling, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
Welcome back to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 123. And this is the App of the Day segment. However, Paul and I were talking and we realized, hey, we don't really have a lot of apps to talk about right now. I think that's actually kind of a good thing. I'm going to give an update on a couple apps, but man, when you find good apps for your mobile devices that you're using consistently, I mean, you're not out on the App Store just looking for stuff anymore, right? And
that's true.
Find things. So I think that's actually says a lot about app developers and app development, and we're not dissatisfied with what we're using, that we're always constantly looking for new things. But if we are, we'll definitely talk about it. So I'll give one update, and I will talk about one new app that I've been using that I don't think is too uncommon for people, but I'll talk about it anyway. So first off, I canceled my Noom subscription. So I've been using Noom. Yeah, I mentioned it. I've been using it for 3 months now or something like that. And I actually didn't really know what it was, right? I've taken health classes before. I've taken through the VA. I've taken what is it? What am I trying to think? Those people that provide health advice. What am I trying to say? There's some like classes or something. Anyway, I've talked to people that are nutritionists. That's the word I'm looking for. I've talked to nutritionists. So I'm very aware of what it takes to be healthy and lose weight. I just have a problem doing it, right? But I'm very aware of the actual science behind it. I'm relatively well read on that. I read articles all the time, not just like, Huffington Post or BuzzFeed articles, but like real articles. So, hang up on that kind of stuff. And it turns out Noom was basically two things. And I want to tell people about this in case you're thinking about doing it. But Noom is basically two things. One, it is daily structured articles, really well-written articles with a lot of psychology and a lot of science behind them. And they're very well done from that standpoint, with some little quizzes built in. It prompts you to weigh yourself every single day, which is a good thing. Prompts you to track your calories and write down everything that you're eating. And then they actually give you you report your foods if it's in their database. If it's not in their database, it's hard for them to tell you what kind it is. But if it's in their database, they either call it a red food, a yellow food, or a green food. And their basic thing is, stay within your calorie limit for the day, but also eat more green foods, which doesn't mean plants. It means foods that are calorie dense. That's what they're really concerned with. Like, for example, there's this one shake thing that it's called Huel. It's I've been having that for basically lunch for the past 6 months. It's kind of like a protein shake, but it's not a protein shake. It's more it's not really like a meal replacement shake either. But the point is, it's 2 cups of water and about 400 calories. So it is a meal, but it's got a lot of good stuff in it. And I'm just doing it because I don't have time to eat lunch, right? I'm just constantly doing stuff, and I can mix with one of these and get on a conference call, no problem, rather than just sitting there eating a meal or crunching on something. But that's why I got it. But that shows up as a red food in Noom because water is not very calorie dense. So, that was a little bit irritating to me. I was like, but it's got a lot of good stuff in it, but it's a red food. That's not why I quit it. The other thing that it has groups. So they I think around week 3 or week 4 or something like that, they put you into a group of people. And if you're the kind of person that's going to interact well with the group, they prompt you at the end of certain lessons to share your experience related to something with the group. And then people can comment on that. And it's intended to be kind of a support group, but it's literally a support group of people you've never met before, which is fine. You can see their profiles, I guess, whatever they put in, and you're supposed to help each other. Well, I never really got anything out of that. And while the articles are great and all, the other 2 things you get out of that is meal calorie tracking and weigh-ins, which I've been doing on my FitnessPal for about 7 years, right? I mean, I've got a long history with my FitnessPal doing that. So that was something I was already used to doing. And my FitnessPal's database of foods is way bigger. And my wife and I both do calorie tracking. She started doing Noom about a month ago, and we can't share, we eat the same meals a lot of times, and we can't share those meals. And so we've each got to enter in everything. On my FitnessPal, you can just, hit the share button and share individual things that you just had together. So one person enters it, and I can send it to her via text. She clicks on it, and it adds it to her MyFitnessPal. And, or would that be her FitnessPal? No, her MyFitnessPal. Yes.
Your FitnessPal?
I know somebody's fitness pal. Anyway, so the point is the only thing Noom was giving me that I guess was a little more than I was normally getting was the articles. And if this is brand new information for you, like if you don't know anything about nutrition, if you don't know anything about what you're supposed to be doing and all the psychology behind it and what makes you choose that apple over that cupcake, if you don't know those things, then Noom is going to be a great resource for education and stuff like that. But for $169 for, which I think the charge for like 10 months or something like that, which is a weird time frame, but I think that's what it was. It just didn't seem worth it to me, for me in particular. And so I canceled it. Here's how the canceling went. It was insane. So first off, one of the people who I'm still not sure is an actual person, it could be a bot, sent me a message that said, "Hey, you haven't logged into the app in like 2 days." That was what the warning. I was gone. I was, there was nothing I could log in and do except read the articles. And then I just was working too long a days and I forgot about it. That was last week when I was in New Orleans. And she sent me a message and I finally was just like, you know what? I'm done with this thing. So I replied to this private message in this group thing to Holly, who's my thing. And in there, again, I don't know if she's a real person or not. And I said, you know what? I think I just need to cancel this. Like, I'm not getting anything out of the articles. I already do calorie tracking and stuff, and I need to find a different way to fix my problems because I don't think this is working for me for the cost. I thought it was something different. Literally got a system generated message within a millisecond of sending that says, it looks like you're having an issue and we'll have one of our system administrators contact you. And then like 3 minutes later, I was credited $116 on my credit card. My account was canceled. Like, it's like, if you don't want to be here, see ya, bye. I was a little bit upset about that, but also gratified at the same time that they weren't going to wait like 10 days to pay me back. They just canceled everything. But then it was like, you're in the business of psychology and coaching. Like, shouldn't you just be like, hey, maybe you should think about this for a second? No, I said cancel. I said the word cancel in my message. I was done within 5 minutes. So yeah, no chance to take that back. So anyway, so that was it. That's what I get rid of. I don't know.
Yeah. Is a hot potato a red or a green food?
You know what? A potato might actually be a yellow food. So right there in the middle, because it is a vegetable and it is calorie dense. So I don't know. Yeah. Hot potato. I don't know. Paul, didn't you say your mom or your mother-in-law or somebody was doing Noom?
Yeah. My mom had signed up for it, and I doubt that she uses it. She's in my entire life gone through a million different fad diets and things. So I'll see her actually in a couple of days. I'll ask if she's still doing it, but I haven't gotten any updates. And I suspect that she, knowing her, she wouldn't be reading the articles, and the personal trainer aspect of it wouldn't really be too appealing, I think. So I suspect that this is that she's going to have to cancel it sometime soon, but we'll see. I mean, I could just be just guessing from previous experience, and maybe there is something about this that works a little better with her than other things have.
Well, and you bring up a good point too. So there were 2 add-ons that I didn't actually pay for. What I had was like the base Noom account. This is like the minimum, right? Still like $169 for, it was something like 9 or 10 months. But you could also add on customized meal plans, which my wife and I already do, but you could add on customized meal plans, or you could add on a training plan. And I don't know what those look like, but they are additional fees. So maybe I'll fully admit this. Maybe if I had done, I don't know, like a training plan or something like that, I would have had a different experience or something. But the articles was really the thing that was getting me down, because I have real big OCD when it comes to finishing something. And there was probably 5 or 6 articles per day. Some of them, you're looking at maybe 20 minutes worth of reading, not that big of a time commitment. But when it's every single day, and then when I miss a day or I don't finish all the articles in a day, I feel like I have to go back. And in fact, when we were gone for Christmas, I was so discouraged with putting in all the random foods that I was just putting in nothing, which means I wasn't opening the app. My way of like coping with that was I didn't open the app at all, which means I didn't read any articles for like 2 weeks. And they kept sending me message saying, "Oh, you haven't opened the app in a while." And so I opened it just to shut those down for a few days. But I was just like so discouraged by the food situation that I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't able to weigh myself because I didn't have our scale. And I wasn't going to use a different scale because that's different results. And I wasn't able to really put any food in because, I mean, you're eating like home baked goods every day. Like, how am I supposed to put that in? So I just got discouraged and didn't do any of it. Well, first week of January, when I came back, I basically contacted them through my little thing there. And I said, hey, can you just roll me back like 4 weeks? And I can just read all that stuff all over again. Just because I couldn't handle it. So that's the other big thing is I liked the information, but man, my OCD just wouldn't allow me to skip articles and feel good about it. You know what I mean? And just keep on going. And I don't know. I felt like I was missing stuff.
Exactly
and
what you feel.
Yeah,
that's the same thing that the people that use their inbox as a to-do list quickly stop being able to open up their emails because it just becomes too daunting. There are too many things. I have too much to sort. And it does remind me, this is way off topic, but it does remind me of a piece of advice I got when I was writing my dissertation was don't give yourself a deadline or a goal in a given day of doing, 2 hours of work, because what happens is you don't do it one day. The next day you go, I got 4 hours of work, and it piles up so fast that it just becomes demoralizing in no time at all.
Yeah.
And so that instead of the 2 hours of work, give yourself something trivially easy, 15 minutes of work. And that 15 minutes of work can turn into an hour or two pretty easily. And then at the end of that, you feel good. And then if you miss a day, you don't feel so bad. And so it's just a way of kind of regulating your own expectations and your own sense of progress. So I could definitely see how having that level of having things sent at you to read that you have to feel like you have to keep on top of it could actually be a massive demotivator too. I mean, I think that's exactly how it would work for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. So I don't know. Like I said, if you're not like that and you can just do what you can every day and you're still getting something out of it, then it might be beneficial. So, I don't know. So anyway, I'll mention real briefly, and because this took a lot longer to talk about than I thought it would, and we went a little long on the other two segments, so I'll keep this short. But I recently got a GoPro Hero 8 Black, which I think is the newest GoPro that's out there. We're doing some new video projects. I'm probably going to pick up another one, but I did want to mention really briefly because I haven't had a chance to really dive into this, but the GoPro app that comes with that. First off, there's certain circumstances because they make so many attachments for these things where you can put a GoPro in a configuration where you can't actually see the screen on the back. So you don't know how your shot is framed. And one of the cool things is the app allows, because the GoPro itself has GPS inside, or at least the Hero 8 Black does. It has GPS inside, it has Bluetooth inside, it has Wi-Fi inside. So you can connect to it through the app really quickly. Like the startup time to connect the app through the GoPro is less than a minute, less than 45 seconds probably. I haven't timed it, but it's very fast compared to other things I've seen. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing is you have all functionality in the app. So I can set the camera up in any situation configuration that I want, and then click into the app, check the picture, change the settings if I want, choose, regular activity settings or time lapse or slow-mo or whatever I'm going to do, and then see the picture that I can see, and then hit start. And it just starts going, and then I can stop it as well. The one thing it wasn't doing, because I think it might be a lower picture quality setting that this will work on, but I've got it set on 4K right now, and it wasn't transmitting that video back in real time. It was just allowing you to see the preview image before you started transmitting. So while you were just had the camera on, you could see the live image, but then once you hit recording, it basically fuzzed out and said, you're not going to see anything. Again, I don't know if that's tied to the image quality that it was sending back or not. It might have been too much for that signal, or it just doesn't do it. Doesn't matter. Once you're already recording, it doesn't matter what it looks like. You're recording. Stop and reset if you need to reset. So I just wanted to mention that because it was pretty cool. And also, I guess while we're talking about the gear, I've heard other reviews on previous versions of GoPros, and the onboard microphone was never like the best. I mean, not the worst either, but definitely not the best thing. And most serious people that were using it for YouTube or whatever would get like an external camera. But I'll tell you what, this camera's microphone is what I mean. The microphone is fantastic. It's really good. Now we're going to get the external media mod kit they said that comes with it, but it's so back ordered right now. It's probably not going to be until April or so, because this just came out a couple months ago. But I'm really looking forward to that. So that should come out. And I'll give a little more information on why I'm buying these cameras and what's going on when all this is live. Hopefully in 2 or 3 more recordings, I'll be able to really announce that and say where you guys can go to see some of this stuff. So cool. But that'll be later on. And I'll probably have more reviews because I've got more gear coming as related to that. In fact, today I just bought 2 crazy. Let me talk about this from a tech standpoint. I went on Amazon. This thing came with a 64 gigabyte micro SD card, which is at 4K, it's about 45 to 55 minutes of video at 4K. And so I needed more cards. The one is not going to do it. But I went on there, a 256 gigabyte micro SD card that is high speed, able to handle 4K, because your write speed to the card needs to be seriously fast. Like the connection between the card and the camera needs to be fast for it to write 4K video in real time. That 256 gigabyte card was $35.
Yeah, that's crazy.
$35. Yeah. They had a 512 gigabyte micro SD card that was $99. So I bought two 256 gigabyte ones. It's like, that's easy math. Because I can switch it out. I mean, 256 should end up being like 3 or 4 hours of video.
Yeah. Buying reputable cards, this is another aside, but buying reputable cards from reputable dealers is important, because, you know, I've seen people, maintenance guys, that have come by my office because they have USB drives that they purchased off eBay. And some of the manufacturers do this nasty trick. They'll sell you what's basically just a 4 or an 8 gig drive, and they'll advertise it on eBay as like a terabyte drive. And they'll sell it to you for $15, and you can keep on writing well above that 4 or 8 gig limit. It just overwrites what was there before, because they've taken out the checks to make sure that you don't do that. So it looks to the uninitiated as it's a humongous drive that's a great deal, but it's really not. So that's probably not what you're dealing with, because I haven't seen that with SD cards, but I definitely have seen that with certain, usually eBay sold garbage USB drives. So that's just a little caveat emptor for anybody.
Nice. Yeah. And I'll talk about this after I get it too, because I just bought these things today, but I also bought a new Lacy rugged 4 terabyte external hard drive. I've got a 2 terabyte RAID drive, I think it is. So it's actually 4 terabytes, but 2 of them internally. So it writes to both, that I've had just hooked to my computer for the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. It just sits there and runs. It's my time machine backup for all my big important folders. So I've had that going for a really long time, but it's a Thunderbolt connection. I thought about pulling it off of there, and just because I've literally never needed it. You know, it's like an insurance policy. I thought about pulling it off there and using it to travel with, because my computer does not have enough space to handle all this video and edit in real time. So when I bought the new Lacy drive, I bought it with a USB-C connection. It'll also do a legacy Thunderbolt, but I've got a USB-C connection. And the thing I like about this 4 terabyte drive that I bought, and this is why I bought this one, is I can edit video from the drive. Like I don't need to just use it for storage. It's got a fast enough speed back and forth that I can actually edit video that's on the drive and just use my computer as basically a screen and just, you know, do that. So looking forward to that, because video, man, that shit takes up a lot of space when you start really messing with it. And then if you're editing video the right way, you're not actually affecting your original files. You're making copies in the video editing software and editing those, so your originals always remain raw and untouched. That's any good editing program will do that. I do that with our podcast editing. So, you know, this podcast right here, because of the original files and then the files that Audition is going to make, and then the WAV file I make for the mastering step, and then the additional MP3 I make that you guys are actually listening to right now. I mean, this hour-long podcast is going to be 4 gigabytes worth of data on my hard drive, and that fills up quick. So, yeah. All right. Well, that's all we have time for.
Did we ramble enough?
I think we did ramble enough. So let us know your tech woes for the spring. We'll see if we can bring someone on to talk about them. But we've got a lot of great stuff lined up for the next few weeks. So keep on coming back. I mean, we're booked out through April, actually, with interviews. So a lot of good stuff coming up here. And we'll bring that all to you on time next 2 weeks. All right. Thanks a lot, Paul, for coming on. We'll thank Dan, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Archaeotech Podcast. Links to items mentioned on the show are in the show notes at www.arcpodnet.com/archaeotech. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com and paul@lugal.com. Support the show by becoming a member at arcpodnet.com/members. The music is a song called Off-Road and is license free from Apple. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.
Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.